Hello and welcome to another episode of Parliamentary Conversations in the Commonwealth, a podcast from the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, better known as the CPA. The CPA promotes knowledge of the constitutional, legislative, economic, social, and cultural aspects of parliamentary democracy, and supports parliamentarians from across the Commonwealth in strengthening their democracies, promoting the rule of law, and safeguarding human rights. In this episode, I sat down with Nusrat Ghani, who was elected as Deputy Speaker and Chairman of the Ways and Means Committee in the UK House of Commons in July 2024. She was first elected as an MP in 2015 and subsequently served as Minister of State for Science and Investment Security, Industry and Economic Security, and Europe. Honourable Ghani, thank you for joining me. So first of all, could you just briefly outline what the role of the Deputy Speaker is within the UK Parliament, as well as specifically what the Chairman of the Ways and Means Committee does?
Well, thank you for having me. So the UK Deputy Speaker, which there are three, and I am the Principal Deputy Speaker and also the Chairman of Ways and Means. In the UK Parliament, that means supporting Mr. Speaker. Our Speaker is Sir Lindsay Hoyle. And fundamentally, what people see the most is us managing the debates and the legislative programme within the Chamber. But as Principal Deputy Speaker and Chairman of Ways and Means, I'm also responsible for the other debating chamber, which is Westminster Hall. And I'm also responsible for all of the committees, which is when legislation leaves the Commons chamber and then goes into a committee state of debate, amendments, and it progresses further. So I oversee that programme with a panel of chairs, that's MP representatives that oversee those committees. Mr. Speaker also has a huge responsibility in managing the estate and the welfare of MPs, of which we have 650. And as the Principal Deputy Speaker, my job is to help him to do that. So I sit on the Finance Committee, which is the overall finance of Parliament, as it were. And we all take huge interest on the supporting MPs where they've got issues around safety and security. But fundamentally, the Deputy Speaker's job is to be neutral, to be the voice of backbenchers, and to be the voice of Parliament, and ensure not only that government's business is done, but backbenchers have their opportunity to challenge what government is doing as well.
You mentioned committee work there, and there's been a kind of double transition. First, in terms of your becoming Deputy Speaker, but also because this Parliament has seen one of the highest turnovers of new MPs in history. So I wanted to ask how you've managed this transition from ministerial roles towards Deputy Speaker, and also how this transition with new MPs has gone as well.
Yeah. So there was an election last July. I forget now, but it was in last July, and it was a remarkable result in the sense that we lost a lot of older MPs, which would come with a lot of historical knowledge on processes in Parliament, and a lot of new MPs were elected, which is good. We always need to refresh Parliament, but it meant we had, I think, the largest number of people turning up to Parliament, their new place of work, without fully understanding the processes, the etiquettes, and the protocol. And in Parliament, after the election, 2 days later, or immediately, we start again. So there's no kind of 3 month learning process, as it were. So embedding in new MPs has been a challenge because there's a lot of new people to try and explain to them the parliamentary process, the etiquette within the two speaking chambers, and also enabling them to understand actually the power that they have as backbench MPs in tabling questions, bobbing for questions, standing for select committees, standing for all party parliamentary groups. So a lot of work had to be done. For myself, I'd been a minister for quite some time, and I was a minister in two departments towards the end of my ministerial career, and had two red boxes, those famous red boxes that you see on TV. So I had a lot of decision making in the evenings and at weekends. So it's been a bit of a transition where I was running portfolios and sectors in the country to now my job is to make sure that I'm supporting the speaker and providing the best base for backbench MPs to challenge government and also for government business to get done. It's a very different style and set of working, but my experience as minister has helped enormously because I know what it's like at that dispatch box. I know what it's like to deliver really complicated and unpopular legislation. And as a backbench MP, I also know what it's like to try and be a backbench MP and have your voice heard. So I am incredibly sympathetic to new MPs and want to make sure they feel confident and comfortable in the chamber. And I want to do my best, which is to raise the profile of our parliamentary debate, which is why I'm here in Lahore, encouraging other jurisdictions to follow the way that we do work, because we think the way we offer democracy is one of the best ways to do that around the world.
It's coming up to International Women's Day as well. And for the first time in history, all three of the House of Commons deputy speakers are women. Could you put into maybe some historical perspective just how significant this is?
It's hugely significant, and I think I really need your listeners to understand that this was not a process where any positions were assigned to women. So all 650 MPs had the opportunity to vote who they wanted to be as deputy speaker. And obviously, and the chairman of Ways and Means, the principal deputy speaker as well, which is the vote that I secured. Lots of people ran, including men. And without having a commitment that you have to have, well, we'd always hoping we'd have one female, but the reality is that the majority of the votes went to three women, which I am one. So it's without any sort of demands. We've got three phenomenal deputy speakers. I've got two really capable women deputising for myself and Mr. Speaker himself, and it is extraordinary. Think about how old my post is. The chairman of Ways and Means has been around since the 1400s. I'm the only second female to do that. When I was elected as an MP, I was 377th MP to be elected. It's not a huge number, right? And when I was made a minister in 2018, it was 100 years since women had the vote. But it was the first time a female Muslim had been at that dispatch box. It's the first time we've ever had a female Muslim minister. We are making strides, but I would argue we're making them a little bit slowly. But then I'm here in Asia, and I realise actually in the UK we are, we are quite a long way ahead. It's important to note that we have been elected to our positions because of our skills and our abilities, and our backbench MPs, male and female, having confidence in us doing the right job. So whoever is in the chamber for International Women's Day after Mr. Speaker, it'll just be the women. And isn't that something to behold?
Quite exciting. So, you mentioned earlier how one of your roles is in supporting MPs within the House. So, I wanted to move on to a few questions of technology and how that kind of interacts with the business of the House of Commons as well. You yourself have been subject to hybrid attacks or technology based threats from malicious state actors. And I know that you're not alone among MPs in facing those threats. I'm just wondering, do you think that these threats significantly affect the business of the House, and how can you support MPs who are subject to these?
I think people that make the threats are obviously trying to um, influence, minimize the impact of British MPs. So they are trying to have an impact. And actually, I'm the first female and the only female MP sanctioned by China. I'm now the only female MP sanctioned by both China and Russia. And when this happened to me, it was a complete shock. But I did go to the Speaker for help, and he was remarkable. And the reality is that more members of Parliament, the more that they do their job, which is without fear and favour, take on institutions, take on, criminals who were sanctioned, or even take on hostile states, they will come under threat. But I have been elected by my constituents. I'm a British parliamentarian. I'm a minister for His Majesty the King when I was a minister. So it's important that I do my job without fear or favour. And we're going to see more of these threats going forward. So the work of the Speaker, the Deputy Speaker, and the estate will become even more crucial in doing this, because some of the threats will come in ways that we're not yet prepared to understand. And obviously, the growth of technology will mean that there'll be malpractice, misinformation, but also AI created images of us and sounds of us, maybe saying and doing things that we would never do. And this is something that was raised at the CPA conference here in Lahore. How do we get ahead of technology? But we can't move too fast that our public, our constituents lose faith in us. So we need to build a level of trust as we try and get ahead of tech as well.
Right. That brings us nicely on to the next question, then, specifically around artificial intelligence, which is something that's come up quite a lot during this conference. With emerging technologies capable of manipulating records, so called deepfakes, or footage, how important is it that an official, accurate account of what happens in debates in a chamber is maintained by the speakers?
It's becoming even more crucial as technology evolves, and people, can access debates and information on their phones. It's in their pocket. So the work of the staff that supports us, which are the staff that support the speaker and myself and the other deputy speakers, the clerks, is absolutely key. And ensuring that people have an accurate interpretation of legislation and how it's debated is going to be key. So one of the things that we're looking at is how do we create the right AI that enables that information to be accessible, but also people to search for it too. We don't want them searching on other platforms and not understand the nuance of a particular debate, because that's then misconstrue what happened and how a person then voted. But this is going to be a major challenge, right? We can see what's happening on other social media platforms and elections that have taken place in the United States most recently. Information can spread incredibly quickly, and it is true to say that there can be more than one interpretation of what's taking place. But we have to make sure that it's absolutely nuanced. So one of the concerns I have is, how do we accurately portray the debates and the votes that take place in the chamber, and also the debates and the votes that take place in committee room as well, without losing the texture, but without providing any sort of misinformation whatsoever. It's not going to be easy. And I don't think we have the answer right now, but I'm looking forward to working with the staff in Parliament and the experts to make sure we try and get this right.
Mhm. Thank you. In your experience, how many MPs are kind of using these AI tools? And one other thing you had mentioned during the conference was the issue of are AIs that are controlled by institutions outside of the United Kingdom or outside of the control of the United Kingdom. Could you speak a bit to that as well?
So we've got the beauty of our parliament is we've got people from different types of backgrounds, right? And actually we've got quite a number of members of parliament that are quite savvy on different types of media platforms. They're also already engaged in this issue about how can we build trust back in politics. And one of the ways we can do that is ensuring that we're dealing with technology. So we've got an engaged audience when it comes to members of parliament, and they're also using different platforms to send messages to their constituents. I did speak at length today around media platforms and the crucial information about the ownership of data. So we think it's just what we see that matters, the information that's being shared. But actually, we have to go one pace behind that and work out who owns the data when I am searching and communicating. And also, where does that data sit? If it sits in a data center that's not in a jurisdiction where we have any legal authority over, how can that data be manipulated against me, miscommunicate to my constituents or against my country? So there are lots of levels that we have to get right, and it is concerning. I was sanctioned by China because I was challenging some of their practices on modern slavery and transparency. There's no doubt that data that resides within China will not have my information and my messaging on that platform. So we have to make sure that we are using platforms where information is freely available to the people that are searching.
So alongside political polarization, there's problem of political resignation as well, where in many years we've seen lower turnout rates, lower engagement with parliaments, and you had mentioned some of the work that the Speaker's office does to reach out to people across the UK. Could you speak a bit to that now?
So it's interesting being in an Asian country like Pakistan. I mean, MPs, as they should be, are well respected. Their experience is valued and their contributions are valued. And I think maybe it's a European psyche, but you know, politicians aren't always revered, as it were. So we have a job in convincing our electorates to have faith in us. And no one has sympathy for parliamentarians. So me saying to you, my job is 6 days a week. We're voting up to 10 o'clock at night. Obviously, weekends, if something happens in constituency, we are busy. We come under attack in the cyber community and in real life. We're not going to garner a huge amount of respect. It just comes with territory. So the reality is there's a lot of burnout. A lot of people enter politics for the right reasons. And I would say that people from across the political spectrum want to do something good locally or nationally. But it's a huge job. It can be exhausting. And you do come under a huge amount of attack, which means that there'll be a greater turnover. So there'll be less or fewer people with institutional memory. I'm also worried in the long term, if we don't have good, decent people standing for politics, we have the wrong kind of people standing for politics. So we need to make sure the job, is one that can be done by regular people, can be done with people that have caring or parental responsibilities. And it's not a job that just becomes, like it did hundreds of years ago, in the purview of the very wealthy or the very extreme.
Finally, I just wanted to ask about your experiences of the conference in Lahore and about the Speaker's office role in reaching out to the Commonwealth more generally as well.
Well, the conference in Lahore has been incredibly well organised. I've been incredibly impressed by the diversity of people attending. So people from across Asia, obviously, but also people from across Pakistan too. And a lot of them are coming to the debate, whether it's on inclusion, in the sense of how to get more people involved in politics, how to do better representation of young people, how do we manage AI, how do we best deliver democracy. Everyone's coming to it at a different angle. But there's actually been quite an open debate. We've had quite challenging arguments debated and discussed. People are keen to learn from other countries, are very keen to lean into the United Kingdom. So I feel we have a responsibility of sharing best practice as well. So I've been very impressed by the CPA conference, very impressed by the Speaker of the Punjab in his ability to convene such an extraordinary group of people. I'm really hoping that people who've attended will feel even more empowered and enthused to go back home and do even more in protecting the very fragile democracies that we're here to represent.
Honourable Nusrat Ghani, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Parliamentary Conversations in the Commonwealth. If you liked what you heard, then don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favourite podcasting platform to stay up to date with our latest episodes. To find out more about the work of the CPA, please visit our website at www.cpahq.org or follow the links in the podcast description.